Hi guys, Mark Dawes here. It's Monday the 8th of February and I thought I'd just do a quick blog post to update you on some developments we had last week, which should be of interest to a lot of you out there teaching in this field. Well, the long and short of it was that Ted Foulger and I went up to North Wales and we met with a family and with the assistant manager of a complex needs team. Now, to give you a bit of background as to why this meeting took place, way back in 2012, their son at the time was in children's services and their son has learning disabilities and challenging behaviour. And we were asked to come in to look at providing some specific training for them on being able to manage some of his behaviours. Like, for example, when he's out in the community, he tends to bolt, he'll drop on the floor in the middle of a road, those sort of things. And we work with the family, we work with their carers, the social services education department were involved with us, and we came up with a pretty good programme that met their needs, working in conjunction with the family. Now, their son's got older and he's gone into adult services. And adult services work differently than children's services. So the nuts and bolts of the situation now is that because he has learning disabilities, that's funded by social services, not a problem with that. But because he also has challenging behaviour, that is funded by the NHS. Now the situation is, with this new situation called direct payments, and I say new, but it's been in for a few years, is that the families now have to set up their own company to actually pay for their loved one's services. So in this case, this family's son. So social services, and in this case the NHS, joint fund it. Then the family are responsible for providing the training and the resources and the staffing and everything else. So in effect, they have to set up their own company, which makes them ultimately liable. Now, the reason this meeting took place last week, is because the complex needs team in this particular area told the family that now that their son is in adult services, they have to use their in-house training because it's billed accredited and it meets their needs, and they have to go for that first before they go for any external provider. So when they contacted me a few years ago about this, I said, well, have a look at it, it's probably okay. They had a look at it, and according to them, it wasn't okay, it didn't meet their needs, it was a basic course, and when they asked specific questions like what do we do if our son bolts, or what do we do if he lies on the floor in a road, they couldn't answer that. And when they said, look, or when this training team said, look, we don't like that particular technique, they said, okay, give us an alternative. And they couldn't come up with alternatives. So the long and the short of it was that this family, this husband and wife, have battled for 2 to 3 years to get training for their son, which bizarrely is training that they'll be ultimately liable for in the first place. So the nuts and bolts of this, which is the perverse dichotomy of all this, is that due to this new direct payments scheme, they get funded, in this case jointly from the NHS and social services. They have to actually use that funding to actually buy in services, buy in training, have staffing, all that stuff, and they are ultimately liable. But the very agency that's providing the funding is then saying to them, we'll give you the funding, but you can only use us. You have to use our in-house services. Now, as a result of this meeting, and we met with the assistant manager, who in fairness was quite a nice guy, he turned around and said, no, the best thing for your family member, in this case your son, is that he gets trained that's fit for purpose. You're not happy with the in-house stuff, so you can use Mark and his training, and particularly going to use Ted, because Ted is the right fit for this particular family. What was very interesting about the training, and I've got to take my hat off to Ted Foulger on this one, was they asked us, as part of a restraint reduction plan, RRP, to actually monitor the restraints. So they said, could you monitor and put together a restraint reduction plan? Now, Ted Foulger, as sharp as a razor, because he's spent over 30 years doing this at the NHS, he was part of a senior management team, he was a senior restraint trainer, or PMBA trainer as they call them, actually turned around and said, no, we're the training provider, we'll provide you with the training, it's actually down to you to make sure that you monitor it. You're the person, you as a complex needs team, are responsible for ensuring that it all works. And this was the really interesting bit that Ted brought up, he said, look, physical intervention and breakaway, that's a management strategy, and that's used when the therapeutic interventions haven't worked. So how are you monitoring the therapeutic interventions? And the net answer to that was, we don't. We don't monitor therapeutic interventions. So this is the real sort of mad thing about all this, which I struggle with, and I always have struggled with, is that they want to provide a service provision for this person's family member, in this case the son. They have to monitor the restraint to make sure it fits a restraint reduction package, but they're not monitoring the therapeutic bit, which is going wrong, which results in the need for restraint. So therefore, it's not a restraint reduction package. Now, this I find absolutely bizarre. And the other thing was as well, it goes back to the old thing. The assistant manager said, well, we normally only use trainers or training providers that are Build accredited. So when we talked about Build, he said I wasn't aware of those facts. So here we have an assistant manager of a complex need team for a large NHS trust that's got massive amounts of funding that they get from commissioners, who doesn't understand what Build does, is, or to any degree, the extent of its accreditation program and what that accreditation actually stands for. So we had an interesting week, and the bottom line is that the parents, after years and years of struggling, have actually got what they want. But here's the thing. People all the time talk about best interest criteria, and this assistant manager was talking about it. We've got to get the best interest for the son, we've got to get the best interest of the family. It's about best interest criteria and what's best for this service user. It's got absolutely nothing to do with best interest. I learned that last week. It's all about self-interest, and it's about funding. It's about the cheapest option. So as long as the cheapest option is the best interest, then it's the best interest criteria because it's the cheapest option, because then they can fund you and you can become responsible for the training that you take on, provided you use their training, because it's cheaper than anything else that's provided out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's fit for purpose. Got this? It's great, isn't it? So I thought I'd get this out on camera to you. The other thing as well that Ted picked up on was when they were talking about this restraint reduction package, they weren't actually on about a restraint reduction package at all, because they're not monitoring the therapeutic aspect of what's failing to actually result in the need for physical intervention and breakaway. All they're doing is an audit. So Ted asked the question, and I've got to tell you, I take my hat off to Ted. I thoroughly enjoyed having that meeting with me. It was absolutely brilliant. He said to them, what are you going to do with the data? And they said, well, we give the data to the commissioning agencies to make sure that they agree that an external agency can be funded as opposed to using an in-house agency. And Ted said, well, it's an audit then. What you're doing is an audit. You're not actually doing anything with the data apart from number crunching. And in fairness, the assistant manager said, yes, that's true. So when you look at the whole plethora of stuff out there, in the last few years, we've seen tons of guidance come out that say you must be best interest and you can't do this and you should do that and you've got to look at resources and you've got to look at this and people should be accredited and everything else that goes on out there. The bottom line is it's always going to come down to funding. And that's exactly what we learned last week. But for the family, they've got what they want. They can get training with whoever they wish, which is absolutely the right thing to do, providing, of course, they do their own due diligence, because they're ultimately liable for the training provision that they actually commission themselves. So this is just a few things for you to think about. If you're in the training arena and you're looking to get involved with this area, you're looking to provide services to families that need help. But the other thing as well is, if you are a family out there and you're being hit on the head with a large rubber mallet that says, look, you can only use this and you can only use that and you can only use the other, and we'll give you the money provided, and you feel that's not fit for purpose, you actually have a case, and you always have had the case, to say we don't want what you offer, thanks very much. We want it from this training provider or that training provider because they meet our needs more specifically, and that is in the best interest of our family member, son, daughter, whoever. So that was an interesting week last week. Enjoy the blog post. I'll kick some more out for you as the week goes on. And thanks very much for listening. And if you want to find out more, there's a link below the video somewhere or a link in the video somewhere. Just click on that and we can tell you loads more. Thanks a lot, guys. Speak soon.